So yeah.
What is a doppelganger?
Yeah. So, a doppelganger and, folklore is, like you see the person who, seems to be completely identical to you, and like you're seeing them as a sign that you're about to die, that kind of thing. And the sort of opening gimmick of the book is she's talking about how many, many times over the years she has been mixed up with Naomi Wolf. In fact, she has this really funny story about being at like a bathroom near like Zuccotti Park when the Occupy Wall Street protests are going on. And she hears these two women at the sink talking about like this ridiculous shit that Naomi Klein just said. And she said she felt like she'd regressed to high school, the mean girls, are talking about her, in the bathroom. And then she realizes as she was listening to them that they're actually thinking about Naomi Wolf, because very similarly to what you were saying about the other podcast in question, there are all of these sort of zany similarities that, beyond having this first name that I guess is just uncommon enough. So, that they're both, Jewish women with, brown hair and this and that. And they had to, she lists off a bunch of these things. At one point, she was reading an art, like after she'd already started to get kind of fixated on this, she was reading this article about Wolf that casually mentioned that Wolf's boyfriend was a film producer named Avi. And Klein's husband is a film producer named Avi.
So insane, though.
Yeah, no, exactly right. So there are a bunch of these sort of strange, superficial coincidences, on top of which, again, I think the name is just uncommon enough that if you're one of the two most prominent Naomis who does like political commentary in English, then you're probably going to get mixed up with each other a bit. So that's kind of the opening gimmick. And I will say, when I first heard about this book, it was at the Socialism Conference last August in Chicago, and Klein was doing a presentation on it. And I was going to meet a friend there, and my friend told me later at the hotel bar that he actually they had actually left early on because he thought that this whole sort of premise was kind of gimmicky and ridiculous, which I get. But I think that it's really being used as this kind of literary device to explore something way more interesting, which is, about the difference between Klein and what she stands for, and Naomi Wolf and what she stands for, and then, what that says about the existence of, as you're talking about in your opening monologue, this political current that in some ways feels like a doppelganger of the left as a whole, right? So Naomi Wolf, started out as sort of the mainstreamiest of mainstream feminists. She wrote about, unfair beauty standards and things like that. She, in fact, in 2000, she was a consultant for the Gore Lieberman campaign. And then by like the Occupy Wall Street era, she had this moment where she was drifting towards a more much more leftish oppositional stance. She liked Occupy Wall Street. She liked Julian Assange, and she, even then, there were signs of what was to come, because she had a bit of a conspiratorial approach to the whole thing. The United States was always like teetering on the edge of fascism. It was about to become a police state. As there were crackdowns on Occupy and whatnot. And then when COVID, well, I should also say that, I think a crucial part of this story is that Wolf burns up a lot of her mainstream credibility because she wrote a book where she made like a really, really basic error in research that was exposed in just like a way that no matter how much you hate Naomi Wolf, like I find I can't like I've listened to the clip a couple times and it's just painful that like in a radio interview she realized that she'd made this like very, very basic mistake, like as the interviewer is correcting her, that like there's this phrase death recorded that means that she was in like these old records that Wolf was assuming meant that the person had been executed, but just sort of due to the quirks of English law in this era, it actually meant that they'd been, they'd been pardoned from execution. And so like, that's the whole premise of the book. And it's just, again, it's incredibly painful to listen to. I think she became a bit of a laughingstock because of that. And then she'd always had this conspiratorial bent. I also think that even during Wolf's leftist phase, let's say in the early 2010s, she never really had much of a material analysis of the world around her. I think that, there was some sort of vague anti-elite kinds of sentiments, and, governments can be bad and scary, and that's kind of about it, right?
Would you agree that a lot of people during that time kind of also have that same quote unquote leftist bend, especially when we talk about the Occupy moment, which is a reason why I don't really posit that as the beginnings of something, because it's just so all over the place. And so many of those people do fall into the Alex Jones camp of conspiratorial thinking, anti-vaccination. And I'm not talking about COVID. I'm talking about like measles and mumps,
right?
A lot of anarchist thinking. Socialism is still not really a word that's being uttered the way it's uttered in 2015, 2016.
Totally, yeah. I mean, look, there is. I'm sorry, I was just hesitating as I was starting to say this sentence because, I don't want to. There's at least one person I can think of from real life who has embodied this, who I probably shouldn't say, but like there's a real like crunchy to Q pipeline, right? Like
yes.
I mean, yeah, like if you like back in 2000, like the late 2000s, early 2010s, anti-vax stuff was largely left coded because that was a hippie thing, right? And in fact, if you go back to like 2008, there are moments on the campaign trail when both Hillary and Obama, neither of them endorsed any of that stuff, but like they pandered to it in a way that's kind of jarring to read some of the quotes now. Because, they're like, oh, well, there are legitimate questions here, please vote for me. And yeah, I think that what I've just finished describing with regard to Wolf is certainly not unique to her. And it's not even unique. I take this is your point, right? It's not even unique to people who ended up going Wolf's way, right? So like in some sense, what I just said would be, my critique of somebody like Glenn Greenwald, who I think is like 1,000 times smarter than Naomi Wolf, but I think has some of the same problems. That there's this sort of generic anti-elite kind of sentiment that's not, tied to material analysis, so it can go off in some pretty wild directions.